start experimenting with. So we can change the camera, we could do different animations without altering the original. So it's very useful to quickly experiment with your cinematics. Directly above that, you can quickly switch between all of your takes. So if you have multiple shots lined up and some of them have different takes, quickly switch between those, play your whole cinematic back, and get a different perspective and different look at how your cinematic would play out with those different takes. So it's a very, very powerful tool to use the take system. If I double click on this shot here, we will go into another level sequence. And this is something that we usually do at Epic. Right now we are in a new level sequence. You can see there's all kinds of tracks here. But if I click this button, we'll go back to the top level, which we call the master track. And again, this is something that we usually do at Epic. We'll have a master track and then populate it with these subsequences. Again, because this allows us to move those subsequences around, arrange them how we see fit, rather than do it in one giant level sequence. So we usually do it in this manner. So if I double click on this and go back into that shot, you can see this is where the meat of this scene is created here. If I scrub through it, I'm moving the marker there. But if I scrub through it, you can see the scene kind of playing out there. We have quite a few tracks in here. I'm not going to cover all of them because I want to go into and start creating our own content. But really quickly, we have a couple that I'll highlight. We have this camera cuts track here. That's being used to define the viewpoint for the cinematic. Now in this case, we're using the player's perspective so that they have full control over the cinematic. Again, more like a gameplay scripted sequence. But we'll start working with this a little bit later when we add our own cameras. Below that, we have an events track, which can be used to kick off blueprint script at runtime. So a lot of these keys here are signaling things inside the level. You can add an event here and have it trigger whatever you want once it reaches those keyframes in your cinematic. Now we have an audio track, self-explanatory effects, some other ambient stuff in here. But I wanted to highlight one of these skeletal mesh actors here, which I've just selected. And it's kind of highlighted right there in the level. If I expand this, I can see it has some sub-tracks associated with this skeletal mesh actor. One of the more important ones is this animation track here. So as you can see, if I scrub back a little bit and zoom in, we've applied an animation here. Right now he's just kind of hanging out around the corner over there. But as soon as I get to that animation that starts playing, he starts walking around the corner, getting into position and playing his animation. And adding animations is just as simple as clicking this button and defining the animation that you want to play. So the rest of our guys in our cinematic were all pretty much set up the same way. They all have an animation track that we've applied different animations to. What I want to do now is create our own sequence and populate that content on the TVs here so that we can play the whole thing back and finish off our intro sequence. So to do that, I'm going to hop to a different map just to save us some time. I've already got it open. There we go. So what you're seeing here is one of our levels in Robo Recall. It's also the backdrop for our malfunctioning robots in the city. I've already got a cinematic partially created here. If I double click to open it up, see it pops up over here. Now we got a little bit different look than what we were looking at a moment ago. If I lock the camera to this, you can see now we have some camera movement. Got some editor icons over here. I can come in here and hit G to hide all of those. But you can see we got some camera movement now, some different tracks, some kind of things kind of happening in the city where the robots are going crazy. The other thing that I'll point out, our shots track looks a little bit different than the one we saw a minute ago, where we had a single line, a single sequence on there. Whenever we're working with multiple shots like this, at Epic we usually stagger them out like this, rather than put them all on one individual track like this. Makes it much easier to see where those breaks are in your cinematic if you alternate between tracks like this. And you can stretch this down as many tracks as you want, but this is usually how we do things, so you can see where those breaks are. So it looks like we have a chopper shot there, a couple other shots. What I want to do now is replace one of these shots in this sequence. In fact, we're going to replace this shot right here. So I'm going to hold Control, not the Windows key, because that's not going to help me. But I'm going to hold Control and mouse wheel up to zoom in, and you can mouse wheel down to zoom out. I'm going to right click on this track here and go down to Properties and uncheck Active, so it's no longer active. So we have this dead space in here where we can insert our own shot, and then it goes into the next shot. Now, Sequencer evaluates from the top down. So if I slide this over a little bit, again, with the power of the shots track, I can move these around. It'll evaluate this top track before going into this track here. So it's just going to play that out and then go into the next track, which I think this will be fine for our sequence. So it just gives us a little bit more room to kind of play in here. So I'm going to create a shot now, which you can do by coming to this plus button here and saying Insert Shot. It's going to ask us for a save name and location. I'm just going to use the default, which is fine. And it's inserted a shot for us. So I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit, like so. And we have this little red marker here. This indicates inside of our scene here how many frames we have to work with. This indicates how far we're going on the master level. So it's a kind of a way to see what's going on inside of your shots, if you're running too long or too short. We're going to use the full 150 frames, so I'm going to come back, move that back like so, and then just slide that over. And keep pressing the Windows key. All right, so we have this shot here, and again, if I double click on it, it is empty. I can hit the home key to kind of focus everything up for us. Now we're going to create our own shot. So I'm going to come over to the viewport here, kind of find a spot in the level, and I think we're going to do something over here, something like this. And we'll have some guys kind of running down the street. They'll jump over this barricade. Another guy will be chasing them. He'll stop and kind of fire off some shots at them as they jump over the barricade. I think that'll be the shot that we're going to use here. So the first thing that we're going to need is a camera. So I'm going to come over to sequencer here real quick. And if you hit the up key on your keyboard, it'll go back to frame 0. Hit down, it'll start playing for you, and then you can step through them by using the left and right arrows, like so. So we're going to need a camera. And we can come to the modes panel over here. Come down to cinematic. We can also add camera rigs and rails if we'd like to, but we're going to want a camera. We could take this camera, drag it into the level, and then come over to sequencer and add that camera, but then we would need that camera cuts track to tell our sequence to use that camera. So there's quite a few steps involved there. We could instead also click this button, which will do all of that for us in one step. So I'm going to click this button here. It's going to create the camera cuts track for us, assign the camera that was created for us as well. It's also going to put us into pilot mode in the viewport so that we can do some fine tuning and frame up our shot however we want, which I think this is going to be what we're going to do. So we're going to leave it like this. The last thing that we're going to want to do for this, because it's a newscast, we want to get a little bit of movement on that camera, so kind of like a handheld shaky cam, which we can do from the camera track here. If you come to the track button, click that, and we have the ability to add camera animation or camera shakes, which you can import these. You can create these externally in Maximaya, bring them in to UE4. We're also going to expose these as part of engine content a little bit later down the line to give you guys some things to play with, as these will not show up if you don't have these in your project. But we have a couple here, so I'm going to go ahead and use this camera noise. We'll try this one out and kind of scrub through and see what it looks like. So there we go. We got a little bit of movement. I think that'll be fine for us. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is add some actors to our scene, because right now we're just looking down the camera, and that's not very interesting. So I'm going to go back to frame 0 and unlock our camera. And I'm going to fly over here like so. Come down to the content browser and take one of our characters here, just plop him in the level. Plop him in the level. And we got a different guy here. He's going to be the baddie of our sequence. So I'm going to bring him in, put him somewhere down here. So we've added these 3 guys to the level. How do we get them to sequencer and start controlling them? Well, if I select all of them, I'm going to hold control and select them all, and I come over to sequencer, we have the ability to add things to sequencer, so you can add events, shot tracks, etc. But anything that you have selected in the level, you can add to sequencer and then control it through sequencer. So we have all 3 of our guys selected here in the level. I'm going to go ahead to add actor to sequencer and add our 3 selections. So it's added all 3 of them. They each have their own transform and animation tracks. So now we can control them through sequencer. So I'm going to select this guy here, and he's selected in sequencer, and we're going to give him an animation. And to do that, we'll come to the animation track, click the animation button, and we're going to look for a run, jump animation. It's kind of what we're looking for. And we got a couple different options here. Looks like we got some variants here. So I'm going to go ahead and use this run to jump version 1 and take a look and see what that looks like. So I'm going to fly over here and just kind of scrub through. So there's our guy. He's kind of running and jumping. He's running and jumping the wrong way, which is not going to help him very well. So I'm going to hit E to go into rotation mode and just rotate him around 180 degrees like so. I'm going to hit W to go into translation mode and kind of position him in front of this little barricade thing there. Might move him back just a little bit. And if we scrub through now, the guy's kind of jumping over, but that back leg is kind of clipping through the barricade there. You kind of see that. We could leave that, but I think we're going to fix that here. And there's a couple different ways we could do that. We could use our transform track here to pop the guy up and then move him over and then pop him back down. Or in Unreal, we can edit this animation directly and modify it. So we're going to do that because it's a little bit easier in this particular instance. So I'm going to select our animation and show you how you can do that. I'm going to right click on here and go to Properties, Browse to it by clicking this button to find it in the content browser. Double click to open it up. That's going to open up our animation tools. Let me bring it over here so you can see it a little bit better. So here's our animation playing back in our animation tools. I'm going to pause it real quick and scrub through it. So here's our guy jumping. And what we want to do is add some keyframes for this animation. We're going to add one at the start position. So somewhere where he's at right now. We'll scrub forward a little bit to where he's going to land and add another keyframe. And then we'll come back and make some adjustments to his knee to pop that leg up inside of our animation tools here. So I'm going to select his knee right there, or what looks like his knee. That should be a good point. I'm going to come up here to the toolbar, click this button that says key to add a key for that. Just scrub forward a little bit to the other side of the jump, something like that. We'll add a key for that. And then I'll scrub backwards a little bit in time, and then just come in here, grab this arc and push that leg up, something like that, and add another key. So what we should see is the character picks that leg way up and plops it back down for us, which is what we want. So let's go ahead and apply these changes that we've made here. It's a much quicker option to edit it right here than take it out to Maya, make those changes, bring them back in. So whenever you run into situations like this is really good to come into the editor tools here and just make those changes. So if we scrub through,
when you applied, did it save over the original or create a new one?
I've created a duplicate version of this. It does. It's an additive to it. It does save over it. So yeah, it did. It's best to make a copy before you do that. Good point. But our guy is clearing it now, which is what we want. All right, so let's keep moving right along here. Let's go ahead and give this guy an animation. I'm going to select our, go back to frame 0 there. Our guy's selected. Let's go to the animation track. Let's give him an animation. Run to jump. And we'll use version 2 for him. So I didn't want to add 2 of them. Let's kill that. So there we go. I think I added 2 animation tracks by accident. There we go. So there we go. He's also running the wrong way, so let's hit E and rotate him around 180 degrees. So, and I think he should be all right there. Let's scrub through and see what it looks like. And he kind of clips it a little bit too. Could move him back a little bit. Let's see if that cleans it up a little bit. I could spend more time with this to fine tune it. There we go. That guy's a little bit better of a jumper. So both of those guys are done. Let's do one more set of animations for this guy back here who's just hanging out, facing the wrong way. So I'm going to hit E and rotate him around 90 degrees. Now for this guy, we're going to do something a little bit different. Our last 2 guys, we use motion capture based root motion. For this guy, we're going to use an in-game animation. And by in-game animation, I mean a looping in-place animation that's usually running at runtime. Root motion isn't baked into his animation, so he's going to be stuck in place. You may encounter that when you're working with sequencer